loud in the street. In the markets she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you. Because I have called and you refuse to listen, have stretched out my hand and no one has heeded, because you have ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof, I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when terror strikes you. When terror strikes you like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, would have none of my counsel and despised all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way and have their fill of their own devices. For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster. So those are Lady Wisdom's words as she's out in like the public places, out in the city gates and things, in the streets, offering this invitation. And I don't know about you, but I read that, and one of the first things that strikes me is how severe the language is. She's not saying, everyone come in here and, just find some rest here. And, she's not just speaking gently. She's saying, how long will you fools not listen? And if you don't, it's going to be bad. And she even goes so far as to say she will laugh, she will mock those who don't come to her and then suffer the consequences for their folly. She also says in verse 28, basically, you can come to me now and you'll get wisdom, but if you try to come to me later at the last minute, I'm not going to help you, is essentially what she's saying in verse 28. So I just wanted to throw this out there for us to think about. What do you think of the way Lady Wisdom is talking? Does this sound very Christ-like to you? Perhaps at first blush? Do you think it would be fair if should we take this type of posture when we're talking to other people who perhaps don't know God? Or if not, how would you make sense of what is going on here?
It's probably just, but to read these words, it does sound very harsh.
Yeah.
I don't know that Jesus would speak to somebody in this way,
Mm-hmm.
even though he'd probably be firm as to the fact that you're not doing right.
Yeah.
And then on down, like in 28, 29 there, it's like, okay, you follow Lady Foolish, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then then you get in trouble and you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I want to be here. And then start, for Lady Wisdom.
Yeah.
And I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, of course, maybe they weren't Christians before this either, obviously, if they were foolish. But should there be some redemption in there somewhere?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. Yeah. That's why I'm asking this question, because it kind of jars with some of our, maybe some of the way we might normally speak in a situation like this. So it's worth thinking through. Luann?
A fool is someone who is closed-minded, who doesn't want to listen to reason. And Jesus talked that way to the Pharisees
Mm-hmm.
and the Sadducees.
Yeah.
And God did to the Israelites
Yeah.
when they were closed-minded and chose to go a different way when they knew better, or
Yeah.
they had opportunities to know better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe that's the difference, where
Yeah.
Christ might not have been as harsh on the adulterous woman,
Yeah.
and he knew her heart.
Yeah.
He knew more than what we did.
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah.
But this sounds like someone who's talking to
So that's a great insight that the people hearing our words, it's important to consider the audience, right? Who's hearing this? Because when I ask the question, does this sound Christ-like to you? Maybe in the general sense, it might not first strike us that way, but when the audience was right, Jesus could speak some very strong, firm words, like to the Pharisees and Sadducees.
Yeah, they were a warning. I mean,
Yeah,
you're gonna, but it's kind of like the old saying, some people just don't learn until they're hit by a two by four.
right. And sometimes, because maybe someone is blind, hard-hearted, that might be the only way to get through to someone is with a very dire warning like this. Yeah, so that's a great thing to think about.
And even then, they don't always.
Yeah, there still might not be a guarantee, certainly. What did you say, Doris?
Folks can
Oh,
be very
I thought you said
Well,
goats.
I've heard the word stubborn.
Yeah. I thought you said goats can be very close-minded, and I was like, well, I'm sure they can be.
Sorry,
Daisy?
I know Nathaniel sent you a message about that David show. We
Yeah.
were watching it, and it goes on where God loves Saul. They did a good job of portraying it. That reminded me of that. He was rebuked because he wasn't following the wisdom of what Samuel was telling him to.
Mm,
So God leading him, and that's the
yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that. Jason?
Yeah, I just add like, I think to Luann's comment, this passage starts out with this wisdom calls aloud outside is what my translation says. She raises her voice in the open square. So this is you are making known like this wisdom, right? You're trying to I guess speak to these people to do the right thing.
Yeah,
Right, and so now it's like, okay, you've been told, and here's what's right, here's what's wrong, and there are consequences for the things that you do wrong. And I don't know that it's as much of a, you could say that, wise people could make a bad decision, right? That can happen.
yeah,
It kind of has happened.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So I think some of this is a little more of just the nature of these people to continually reject this wisdom
Yeah.
that's been presented to them.
yeah,
It's not somebody who's trying to do the right thing and stumbles and makes a mistake. These are people who have ignored that message. They've turned away. They're continually going back to Lady Folly.
Yeah.
Folly, right?
Yeah.
They're staying in that lie.
yeah,
So those are just some of the, and when you get to that point, then maybe that ties into what you said. At some point, there's nothing else you can say to them.
yeah,
Kind of said all I can say.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, and to connect what you were saying and Luann, I remember, Luann, you said you think of fool as being someone who's closed-minded, which very much like what you were saying. Opening verses of Proverbs say fools despise wisdom and instruction. So there's kind of a definition in the first few verses given. And Proverbs seems to have a couple of categories. There's the fool, and then there's also the simple-minded. And it seems like there's maybe a little more hope for the simple-minded. They just maybe just haven't learned, and they can receive the wisdom maybe more openly. But the fool is someone who, like, their life is set against it in that kind of hardness of heart, like you're talking about, and you as well, Jason. So, yeah,
God called the Israelites stiff-necked people
yeah,
multiple times because they were going after idols and their own desires.
yeah, that's true. Well,
Yeah, I think there's a difference in somebody who's, who's open to that wisdom or open to Jesus, and somebody that has rejected that thought already, right?
yeah,
And I mean, there's a lot of cases of that, right? I mean, even Paul's, hey, just dust off your feet and go to the next place, right?
yeah,
You can't do
yeah,
it for people.
that's right. Yeah,
But there was also cases, like in, what was it Athens, where the unknown God,
mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, there is where he got a very different approach, right? Or very much of like, hey, let me explain this one to you.
Yeah,
Let me help you understand this guy.
yeah,
So it's a
absolutely.
very much different approach, but those people were more apt to receive that wisdom.
Well, and it definitely takes wisdom to know kind of which approach to take in which situation.
which is the discernment that,
Proverbs is offering us, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yep,
yeah.
It's some place in the Bible, I keep thinking there's some place where I read it's either wisdom or knowledge. It's like silver.
Yeah, I think we will read a passage. There's several, I think, that say that. I think if we make it far enough, we'll even read one later in Proverbs that'll say, no, it'll say, actually, it'll say something like, choose me over silver and choose me over gold. But yeah, there are Proverbs like that will compare wisdom to
And if
silver and
you
gold.
seek after it, you will find it, but you have to seek it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the fool is not someone who's interested in doing that.
Chapter 3:14 is somewhat, one of the silver mentions and gold.
Would you like to read that for us, Doris?
Sure, it says, well, let me go back to 13. Happy is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. For her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain than fine gold.
Yep. And then in verse 15, she's more precious than jewels. Yeah, same kind of idea. Well, great insights. Great, thanks for sharing. A couple things that I'll add that maybe can also help us appreciate the words of Lady Wisdom here and kind of the tone that's taken. One thing, I do think it's important for us to remember this is a metaphor. It's not describing a literal woman standing in an actual marketplace. And so as she's mocking, the fools and stuff, obviously there's not literal mocking going on here either. And so I think the whole idea of wisdom like mocking at what fools do, I don't think that's meant to give us permission to do that. It's meant to say, it's meant to draw out the glaring contrast between the way of the wise and the way of the fool. So that it is kind of almost laughable how different their lives can go, at least in the abstract. When we know someone who's making destructive choices, it's a more tragic thing. But when we're thinking about it with a metaphor in more abstract terms, the contrast is so sharp. And that's what I think is going on with wisdom mocking at the ways of fools. And then also with wisdom saying in verse 28, you can come to me now, you'll get lots of wisdom. Come to me later, I'm not going to help you. And Doris said, it seems like there should be some redemption, some hope for that. And we certainly think in the scriptures of the gospel, like Christ will receive anyone who comes to him, even if it's like a deathbed conversion, if it's a genuine one, right? He'll receive anyone at any time. He wants to save everyone. I think this is a metaphor, and I think what's going on here is the book is trying to remind us, trying to teach us how wisdom works. The way wisdom works is that if we don't seek it now, if we don't make it a pattern of our lives to seek it, well, then all of a sudden when we're in a tough situation and we're trying to figure out what to do, we can't just say, well, let me stock up on wisdom now, like cramming the night before a test. That's just not the way wisdom works. You can cram knowledge that way, but wisdom by its very nature is this lifelong thing. And so if we don't come to wisdom now, when we need it, we're not going to have it, And so I think that the language there is just reminding us this is how wisdom works. We have to seek it now, or else it may be too late later. Go ahead, Lynn.
It's in chapter 2, where it starts, my son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. Yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God.
Yeah.
So it talks about, this ties in that this is someone who's open to it and wanting to find it.
Yeah. If you will seek it, you will find it, which is what Jesus teaches as well in the Sermon on the Mount. Ask and you will receive, seek and you will find.
Which is the difference between a fool and
Yeah.
a wise person.
Yeah. We're a fool and someone who is not yet super wise but wants to be, right? Yeah. And even that person has wisdom in knowing that they need to be seeking it. Right? Anything else? Jason?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, you stressing the point of this being a metaphor. And I guess that hit me a little different, right? Because it really, when you think about, 26 says, I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. When your terror comes like a storm and your destruction comes like a whirlwind and distress and anguish come upon you. Obviously, your questions are geared toward getting us to think about these, this strong language and this being a metaphor. But, that almost takes care of itself, right? So when you see people who are really trying to make good decisions, follow, learn and gain knowledge and understanding, and apply that in a way that's pleasing to God, that's putting that wisdom on display, and you can see that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody's doing the opposite, you can see. I mean, you may not even, you can see the result, or you can see what's coming down the road for that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And so, in some ways, when you think about that, I mean, there is some like I told you so. Like,
Yeah.
you get that, and that's a natural. Nobody has to say anything,
Yeah.
but that's happened. It's like I saw that coming for you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to try to tell you, or there was wisdom out there, knowledge that you could have been seeking.
Yeah.
So it's strong language, but again, you're stressing the point about it being, a metaphor, and that strong language is intentional, right? To
Yeah.
drive the point home. But I guess I'm sort of thinking now, like in reality, it's not that strong, but it happens that way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I think so. I mean, it's a metaphor that's meant to apply to reality. It's meant to correspond to reality. Or else it would be a metaphor that was no good if it didn't do that. And so, yeah, the language is strong because if I'm tracking what you're saying, like the language is strong because the situation is that serious. This is our life, and you've got to go one way or the other. So,
There's no real element here where Christ or any of us would ever see somebody that has just made a bad decision and they've wrecked something terribly,
right,
and you're not going to stand over and laugh.
right, right,
You're not going to do that.
right.
That's not what Christ would want you to do. That's not
Yeah.
what He would do.
Yeah,
Right? So that's the language, though.
yeah,
But I think but in some ways, that laughing sort of just happens. I don't know I'm not sure how to describe that, and it's almost like the person who now failed, it kind of feels that way. Right?
yeah. And almost like it all happens internally.
Right.
Yeah, great point.
Thank you. That's probably a good way to.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it as well. Yeah. Anything else on this?
Interesting, it's written by Solomon.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what point in his reign he wrote this.
Yeah.
Or his life. Was it before he kind of turned away?
Yeah. Yeah. Proverbs is kind of a composite book. It's not all Solomon, but Solomon has a contribution here to the book. And of course, we know what happens. He kind of metaphorically listens to woman folly in the sense if he marries all these women who worship other gods. Yeah. He kind of falls prey to. You could say if he's the author of this portion, he really goes against his own advice later in life, his own
I
wisdom.
didn't realize it was a composite.
Yeah,
Writers of that time.
there's portions that will say, like, this is the wisdom of this person, and it'll be a long section, and another portion will say, this is the wisdom of these folks, but some of it is directly tied.
Solomon's
some,
are 10 through 22.
Okay, thank you. Solomon is 10 through 22, chapters 10 through 22. But certainly, I mean,
Over a number of years.
yeah, it's a big compilation. And certainly Solomon, whether he's the author of this portion or not, would agree with what's here when he was in his good days, right? Yeah. Well, a couple other things we can think about. One thing that stuck out to me that I didn't get to in the sermon, but Proverbs 7, verses 1 through 5. Again, this whole thing is coming to us as there's this father speaking to his son about these two women, and one is very clearly like this promiscuous prostitute and things. So we think about like romantic relationships within this context, and yet we have this in Proverbs 7 that seems, at least on the surface, to kind of trip up that whole metaphor, or maybe just complicate it. Proverbs 7, "My son, keep my words and treasure up my commandments with you. Keep my commandments and live. Keep my teaching as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call insight your intimate friend, to keep you from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words." So he says, say to wisdom, you are my sister. So we might have a slight alteration of the metaphor. It's not a problem if it is, but you have this one trying to, within the symbolism, tempt him with like illicit sexual activity, and that's referring to like all the foolishness you can make in your life. This other who could be coming along and saying like, you know, treat me like you would a sister, and I will bless your life. And certainly that language can work. But I think it's worth maybe pointing out the possibility that our English translations, at least mine, does anyone's translation say anything different in verse 4 besides
Mine
sister?
has it could be an ancient admitted wife.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
It's anticipating where I'm going.
I remember reading that
Yeah.
years ago, and I was like that.
Yeah.
And it's in Song of Solomon.
Yeah, okay. The footnote knows what I'm about to say
Yes.
then. So the Hebrew word for sister doesn't have to mean like your blood sister, biological sister. It also can just be a term for more like a close loved one. And there are instances where a husband actually uses this word for his wife. So just one example, and Chastity, you mentioned where I'm going to go already. Song of Solomon chapter 4 is the one example I'll give. Song of Solomon chapter 4 verses 9 and 10, if you want to turn there, says, "You have captivated my heart, my sister, my bride. You have captivated my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than any spice." So there's one context where clearly it's not talking about a sister, right? And so it could be here that it is the same idea going on.
It's at 5, it's in 5, 5:2 also.
Okay, let me turn there. 5:2. Okay, open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. Yeah, same thing.
I just think it's so pretty.
Yeah.
I think it's so pretty.
So the word can also be used in like a romantic type of context. And so I think, I could be wrong, but I think it's worth exploring for the sake of understanding the language of Proverbs. I think basically the father is exhorting the son here to take Lady Wisdom as a bride. You know, you have this prostitute who's making an offer, but you also have this woman. You could marry this woman, this wise woman. And so that contrast just works so much more neatly than one being a sister. So that's why I'm thinking the father is saying, you know, take this woman as a lifelong companion. You know, make wisdom a lifelong companion, basically. And I think that also makes further sense of one passage we did read this morning. If you want to turn back to chapter 3, verses 16 through 19. Chapter 3, 16 through 19. "Long life is in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold fast to her are called blessed." When it says that she is a tree of life, I could be wrong here, and you all are welcome to disagree or to throw out maybe other things as well. But I think what it would be saying in this type of context is, if you marry this metaphorical woman, She'll be a tree of life in the sense that she'll bless you with a lot of children. And the children of wisdom would be, we could think about the application of wisdom, and we could also think of the results of wisdom. Right? The children of wisdom are things like success and fulfillment, and within the context of Proverbs, prosperity. If you take along wisdom as a lifelong companion, you're going to see, the results of this all over your life. And so I think that's kind of where the metaphor is going. That to me is just really interesting and just helps me see the text more clearly. Does anyone have anything they might like to add or contribute to that? Daisy?
Mine has a footnote about the tree being a reference back to the tree in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
The ultimate wisdom.
Yeah.
When you take on wisdom, you're going all the way back
Yeah.
to what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that could definitely be happening at the same time as well. Absolutely. Because that tree when sin entered, right, humans were cut off from that tree, but wisdom can be the path back to that tree. Anything else?
It's just kind of customer says, wise living gets rewarded with honor, stupid living gets the booby prize. It's an interpretation.
Oh, yeah. I was reading I tried to read a commentary for some insight into this, and the commentator referred, instead of Lady Wisdom and Woman Folly, there was Miss Wisdom and Miss Stupidity. That was the way it put it. Yeah. Well, in the time we've got left, we still got a little bit of time. I'd like us to go to Proverbs chapter 8. Proverbs 8 is where Lady Wisdom speaks the most. She has a very long speech here. Very long, I mean, it doesn't take all that long to read, but it's most of the chapter. And I thought it'd be nice to work through it and just maybe make any observations for us to share along the way. We got to read a portion of it this morning, but I think it's worth reading in full. So I'll just read this, and then if anyone has anything they observe, questions, or things they'd like to share from this, feel free. Proverbs 8. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portal, she cries aloud. To you, O man, I call, and my cry is to the children of man. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. This is what I was thinking about earlier, the way, and take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance in the way of evil, and perverted speech I hate. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight, I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles, all who govern justly. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness in the paths of justice, granting an inheritance to those who love me and filling their treasuries. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. And I think this is the portion we read this morning. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was beside him, like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains the favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. That's Lady Wisdom's lengthy speech. Right near the end, after that, we get that language of her inviting folks into a meal, and Woman Folly does the same. And then after that, you're into the Proverbs of Solomon. And, the introduction's over, and it's time to really start learning this stuff starting in chapter 10. So, as we read that, did anyone maybe have anything that stuck out to them, anything they wanted to share, or questions they may have for the group? Daisy?
I think I love how we study things in context and in groups like this, because if you take a part of this, it can be taken out of context and people use it for prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you read the whole thing, that's not what it is.
Mm.
And so that's what stuck out to me.
Yeah.
The context of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of along the lines of the prosperity gospel thing, in Proverbs, there's a lot of Proverbs, once you get into chapter 10 and keep going, a lot of Proverbs about, basically the person who fears the Lord, person who walks wisely, they're going to be blessed with riches and big houses and, big families. And on the one hand, we have books like the book of Job that remind us that doesn't always go that way necessarily. But also, it's important to remember the nature of the old covenant. Israel's covenant was, if you will be faithful to the Lord, he's going to bless your land. And you'll dwell securely, you'll be taken care of, you'll prosper. That's the nature of that covenant, because it's so tied to the land and the nation. The new covenant is different in that it's more like, if you will seek me, if you will seek God, if you'll be faithful to him, you'll lay up treasures in heaven, right? So it's a different sort of covenant, different sort of focus. And when we forget things like that, like what covenant is this passage in, it can easily fall into prosperity gospel. And even in the old covenant, there's warnings about like getting obsessed with riches and things as well. So, yeah. Anything else? One thing that stuck out to me, verses 10 and 11. Take my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. Wisdom is better than jewels. We were talking about Solomon earlier in the later days, but in his earlier days, the Lord approaches him basically and says, ask me for whatever you want, I'll give it to you. And Solomon asked for wisdom when he could have asked for the silver and the gold and the jewels. And of course, the Lord blesses him abundantly for that. It's such a wise decision by Solomon to humble himself and acknowledge he needs the Lord's wisdom. And so that kind of gets lived out historically in Solomon's life, what we read here in verses 10 and 11.
But material things are just stuff.
Yeah,
You can be happy without stuff.
yeah, definitely. That's another wisdom book, Ecclesiastes, talks about you can have all this stuff and it's all just so empty, right? It's all vanity.
So, as I've gotten older, I know a lot of people have jewels and stuff. I've never really bought a lot because I couldn't afford it. But, if the jewelry that I have, or whatever, if it were a diamond or a real expensive ring,
Yeah.
how does it change my life?
Yeah,
It doesn't. It's just something that I have to dust off, keep the
yeah,
weight on my finger or
Yeah.
around my neck.
yeah.
It's not out every day.
Mm-hmm.
It really is just stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as you get older,
folks have done surveys and stuff of things that people is near the end of their life maybe wish they had done differently. And I think that the number one thing from what I remember is always like, I wish I'd spent more time with family or something. It's never like, I wish I had more stuff, It's never what people are thinking about.
What if you had a crown of jewels, like what the king and queen of England have to wear, or what, those are heavy. I mean, really, it looks pretty on the outside, but it's a burden.
Yeah. Well, and that physical burden fits really well with when we get that stuff, then you have the anxiety of having to hang on to it, and the anxiety of what could happen if I lose it. There could be a natural disaster, it could get stolen, these things could lose all their value in some other way. But like Jesus teaches, he offers a treasure where thieves don't break in and steal, there's no moth, no rust. Wisdom is something you're not just going to lose like that. You have to willingly give it away. And so it's a better kind of treasure.
And usually when people go through things, fires or whatever, the physical things that they treasure are things that mean something to them, has a connection with
Yeah.
a friend, a family, or passed down from generations, that it's more than just a stuff. It's
Yeah.
a symbol of something else, a
Yeah.
friendship, a period of their life that was
Yeah.
important to them.
Yeah, and that is, I think, a different story than being obsessed with stuff. Those are things that are like links to people, links to things in the past. Even if it's like something that's not worth 2 cents, but it may be a link to someone, you used to have a close relationship with. The sentimentality.
My favorite line, I think, of sometimes, is from a Steve Martin movie. I hope I got the right title, The Jerk, where does anybody recognize that?
Yeah,
The Jerk. And it's when Bernadette Peters, they get married, they lose everything, and she's sitting out there, I think she's in the yard, and she's saying, and everything's having to be sold or whatever, and she's like, it's not the money, it's the stuff.
Hmm.
That line just cracks me up.
Yeah. I haven't heard of that movie.
You have?
No, I have not.
Oh,
No.
well, that's kind of a classic. Look it up.
Okay. I know Steve Martin, but haven't heard of that movie.
But it's pretty funny.
Only also think of how the Bible was told back then. It wasn't written down. It was passed down through stories, and that's wisdom being passed down
Yeah.
through generations, and that was more than anything they could pass down to their
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think if we could go back in time and ask an ancient Israelite, where can you find wisdom? Hopefully they would say the book of Proverbs, but they'd also probably say the books of Moses. That's where wisdom is located, and that's stuff that, in addition to the writing, it's not like everyone had a copy, parents have to pass that down to their children, every generation.
Pretty amazing how that all survived to end up here.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
I mean, there has to be something special to it.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know, I keep thinking of Jesus when we talk about wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean, I just keep thinking of John, John's gospel, and the wisdom
Mm-hmm.
that's found in the example of Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should always, when we're thinking about wisdom, be thinking of Jesus.
Yeah.
He's the wisdom of God. Yeah. Well, and that along those same lines, verse 36, the very end of this speech, she says, "All who hate me love death." And that reminded me of in 1 John, we read, "He who does not love abides in death."
Yeah, hey, John, that was, all of his writings are definitely divine. I mean,
Well, and what I'm thinking here is Jesus is God's wisdom on clearest display, and at the heart of it is his sacrificial love. Love and wisdom are two sides of the same coin in that sense. And so either way, we abide in death when we choose not to be interested in these things.
So communication, speech, and talking, and that's how you gain knowledge, is in understanding from observation.
Yeah. All right. Well, our time's about up. Thank you all for discussing and reading, and hope this was helpful, and just go maybe a little deeper with some things that we weren't able to get to during the sermon. So we'll go ahead and wrap up now. Jason, would you be comfortable leading us in a prayer as we wrap up? Okay, and we'll be dismissed.